Hi, I'm Brian Russell, and it's a real privilege to have the opportunity to share with you my own personal time management system. I call this Mastering Time for Spiritual Leaders, and what I'm really talking about when I say mastering time is the ability to actually, in a way, feel like you're bending time. I talk to so many students and pastors, and if you don't get the time right now, this will be a problem the rest of your life, who always feel overwhelmed, always feel overworked, always feel like they're neglecting their family, always feel like they're choosing something that's not as important over something that's really important. And I want to let you know how I've figured this out to work in my own life in ways that allowed me to do the very things that I've sensed that God has called me to do, and while simultaneously maintaining my own personal relationship with God, maintaining fantastic relationships with my wife and my children, and having friendships with people literally all over the world that I do stay in touch with, along with writing books, teaching classes, doing a podcast, coaching pastors, speaking from time to time. How do I get all those things done and essentially still stay fresh, alive, excited about the future? It's these principles. And so I just want you to know these are trench tested. I don't share anything ever that I haven't tested on myself first. This is true of the content of my classes. I have to be all in with something for it to ultimately for me to feel comfortable enough sharing it. So this stuff comes out of my life, and I'm 54 now. And once I figured this out, when I was in my 40s, life has been so much easier, actually more enjoyable, and allowed me to be excited about even pondering working, I don't know, maybe till I'm 99 even. It's fun. Now here's the tricks though. First, let's recognize, number one, that all of us, every single person, from Elon Musk, who seems like he does all kinds of stuff, to a retired person, we all have exactly the same number of hours in a day. We have the same number of days in a year, all of those things, okay? That's critical. And so the first thing that we need to prioritize, and this may sound a little odd, but it's sleep. And so commit to sleeping as much as you need. And for most people, that's somewhere between 7 and 8 hours. So right now, if you're not sleeping 7 or 8 hours, the trick, you're never going to solve time by sleeping less. I always hear, I'm just going to sleep less. Don't do that. You know, from in certain seasons, maybe sometimes people have to miss sleep, and people will say, hey, Navy SEALs don't have to sleep. Well, I've actually met a couple SEALs, and they do sleep. Now, what they're trained to do is on these intense missions, they know they can go for multiple days with very little or sometimes no sleep in mission critical situations. But guess what? Most of the time, they sleep just like we do. Okay, so it's super important not to look at extreme examples and say, well, that person didn't need to sleep. So first, commit to 7 or 8 hours. I guarantee your life will change. If you don't listen to anything else and you just sleep more, you'll immediately get more things done because you'll have energy. Okay, so first of all, sleep. Okay, second, and make sure that you have a calendar. My system runs on a calendar. Now, when you start out, you need to be super detailed on your calendar. Once you get a flow, you don't literally have to put everything on the calendar because it's going to work out. I mean, so like, for example, I would literally put my sleep on the calendar. You know, like for me, right now at this season of my life, I go to bed and I don't stay out because I live by this. I try to be asleep basically by 9:30 every night, and so that lets me get up at like 5:30 every single day. That's my rhythm. Again, deviate sometimes, maybe a half hour here or there, but I always get up early, so I prioritize a good night's sleep whenever possible. So put that on your calendar. And the second thing that goes on, and this is critical for spiritual leaders, because oftentimes the first thing that goes when we're busy is our devotional life. So whatever your rule of life is, whatever your rhythms are, and by rhythms, I would include things like your exercise, taking care of the body temple, the food you put in your body, and then also the classical spiritual disciplines, scripture, prayer, worship, fasting, the different things that we typically expect when you usually hear about rule of life. But what is your daily rhythms? Journaling. Make sure you put that on the calendar, space that out so you know that you always have time for that. That's going to be the secret. Sleep and having ongoing access to the very things that fuel what your soul really needs will allow you to be vibrant. The third thing that needs to go on the calendar is your relationships. A lot of folks worry about, do they spend enough time with their children? Do they spend enough time with their partner? Do they spend enough time with friends? Well, schedule it. Put it on. Now, again, there's going to be seasons where that may be difficult, but my wife and I, we have a date scheduled. We just know it. Every Tuesday, we have a date. And occasionally we do miss that, but that's something that we know it's going to happen every single week. And I'm going to say through my over 10 years of marriage now, we've rarely missed a Tuesday date because that was a commitment that we make to each other. Now, we spend lots of other times together too, but literally pencil in date times, pencil in times you're going to spend with your kids. My children are all grown up now, but we still schedule coffee. I speak with my parents at least every single week. I know that's going to happen on a Sunday afternoon and other times as I need to. So prioritize the relationships, because I'm just going to tell you, you're going to be really glad that you did, because ultimately that's what's going to be important in your life, right? Now, again, all that goes on the calendar. And if you think, geez, it's not romantic putting dates with my spouse or my boyfriend or girlfriend on a calendar, well, guess what? That tells them that you value them even more than your own work, because you're making sure that you don't lose these things. Same would be with kids' soccer games. Again, I could go on, but sleep, get your rule of life on your calendar, get your relationships on your calendar. And then the next thing are going to be your priorities. And the critical piece for priorities is you need to know your why. I have a whole nother video that talks about this. But we want to live with intention, with purpose. So know what your why is for this season in your life, let alone for the big picture of your life. There's lots of other conversations we have, but if you don't literally know what your calling is and what your why is, that would be an important conversation to have and to think that through. And again, I have to have another video on knowing your why that can help you. Because when you know your why, you can immediately schedule the things that will advance you towards that goal. Like, for example, again, I teach, I write, I have lots of different things that I do, but one of my highest priorities for me is the ministry of both reading and writing. And so I try to do that at 2 times. My brain works the best in the morning, so I always try to do the most creative things immediately once I finish up my rule of life in the morning. I'm going to start writing, and I try to do that at least an hour every single day, and or create. If I'm creating a video for a class, or even like this video, this is happening when I'm at my best, because I want my creative juices. That's my why, is to create. I seek out, study, and try to embody the deepest truths about God so I can share them with others lovingly, compellingly, and in transformational ways. That's my why. And so that goes absolutely on my calendar first. And I try to work everything else around that. So put your priorities on there. This is as much as you have time. Now, I know some people have jobs and some people have more set schedules. So I'm talking about the time that you can actually control. Schedule your priorities as much as you can when you are going to be at your very best. Don't put the hardest things you have to do that's going to take your brain when you're the most tired. Schedule them as much as you can control when you're at your best, and you'll see life will suddenly change. You're going to get more things done. And then obviously you put all your obligations in. Meetings that you have to go to, other pieces of work that you have to do, things that aren't mission critical but necessary that have to happen. Maybe it's even like going shopping, things like that. Put your obligations in. If you get all that on your calendar, you're going to see your life begin to change. Now, these principles work over time. So if you're completely swamped right now, let me give you a couple of other ideas that will help you to actually be able to apply this. Again, use a calendar. Now, you can use an old-fashioned paper calendar. I like to use a Google Calendar because I can see it on my phone, I can see it on my computer, and use one calendar that lets you put everything on there. So if you have like a work calendar that you don't want where you work to see all your personal stuff, do it all on a separate Gmail. You can, have your work calendar, but then put your work calendar on your personal calendar too. So literally your whole life is there. Okay. Then the second thing, and this is a word that some people might not like, but here's the deal. If you want to learn how to master time, you have to learn to be absolutely ruthless on how you spend your time, right? We need margins for fun and such. And by the way, going back to the rule of life, one thing I did forget to mention, make sure that you schedule in a Sabbath up front. And that's part about being ruthless, is make sure you have a Sabbath each week. And again, we don't want to get into complicated exegesis about what Sabbath really means, but here's what it simply means if you want to apply this to your life. Make sure there's at least one day a week that you wake up having not worked the previous day on your job, and that will be life-changing. We need to let ourselves rest, and so you have to be ruthless to be able to get to that point. Again, do you sometimes miss your day off once in a while? Sure, but if you're missing your day off, and this is especially true for pastors, I know so many pastors. I talk to dozens of pastors every single week, and I always ask about Sabbath, and most consistently miss this, and that's going to slowly rust out your ministry. So make sure you get your Sabbath in here. That's why ruthlessness comes in. And here's another thing, and there's a whole nother video on this. If you want to be ruthless, you have to get really comfortable being able to say no. Now, I'm a people pleaser. I was also used to be known as a workhorse. So what I've had to learn to do is I don't really have rules for saying no. I came up with rules for saying yes because I always wanted to say yes. So what are your rules? What would be your rules for saying yes to any opportunity that you give? So be ruthless and set up a set of principles that allows you to decide yes or no to something. Like for me, it's an automatic no unless my yes filter gives me a yes at the end. And that's to protect myself from being in a place where, oh no, I don't sleep, I'm tired, I'm missing dates with my wife, I'm not spending time with my kids, I'm not getting my most important priorities done that God wants me to do. So make sure you're ruthless, and that ruthlessness starts with yourself. Be ruthless so that you can live as the person that God called you to be. Okay. Also recommend margins. Don't stack your calendar. If your calendar is meetings at 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, it's never going to work. That's what happens at the doctor's office. And you know what it's like when you're there and you're waiting because the doctor tried to see too many people. Give yourself the gift of 15 minutes at least between every obligation or meeting that you have so that you can take a little break, go to the bathroom, get water, chill, maybe call a friend or whatever you need, but schedule margins. I try to do my work in no more than 2-hour bursts. Sometimes it's a 1-hour burst, sometimes it's 90 minutes, 2 hours, but I don't sit down and think, oh, I'm going to write for the next 5 hours, because that just doesn't happen. End up wasting a lot of time. So give yourself blocks of time to work with. And then the last tip that I'll give is, this is where the calendar gets really important. Review. Okay, here's my process. At the beginning of every month, and sometimes you want to make sure you peek at the end of the month so you don't get tricked by something that's happening at the very beginning of a month, but really close to the beginning of a month. Look at the whole month and just notice which weeks look more demanding. This is important if you're a student, but it also works if you're a pastor. There's always seasons and times of a month where things sort of stack up. So you want to notice what weeks are going to be the most challenging, so you're ready and not surprised. Second thing, and I do this on Sunday, and I would recommend, I think Sunday night's a great day to take a look at the calendar for the next week, just to see what's coming up, so you can kind of plan out what the rhythms are going to be. Share those things with your wife so that she knows what's going on, or with your husband. Share them with your children, but just make sure your partner knows what's going on, your family knows what the week in advance is going to look like, and most importantly, you, so that you can kind of schedule things, right? And then the third thing, every evening, and you can do this earlier in the evening or right before bed. You can kind of make your choice. I like to do this a little bit earlier. When I'm done with work, whenever that is, I like to write down 3 things that went really well during the day so I can celebrate. What can I celebrate about this day? And then I look, okay, what was undone that I'm going to need to do the next day, and then what's coming up the next day. By doing a quick review each evening, what that does is I don't have to wake up at 3 in the morning remembering I forgot to do something. I can actually clear my mind, know that this day is over, and the rest of the evening I can be fully present with the people that I love. Or if I'm by myself, I get to just chill out because I know that this day's work is done and I know what's coming up the next time. Now, again, these principles have served me really well. My hope for you is that you can take some of these ideas and make them work in your life so that, when we talk maybe 20 years from now, or even 30 years from now, or maybe even next year, that you could say, you know what, I figured out time, and I know what you meant by how to bend time, because I managed to be able to do the things that God's called me to in a way that allowed my own soul to grow in grace consistently, allowed me to fully be present and love the people that I love the most, and allowed me to stay thriving and flourishing. If you have any questions, I'd love to hear from you. Happy to have a conversation. I'm Brian Russell, and it's my absolute privilege to be your professor.